Well, it's Friday, November 14th, 2025, and this is the weekly auction update. Take a look and see what's been going on in the Asian art market over the last week. Some things that are coming up. It's going to be quiet now for a little bit. We're heading into Thanksgiving and then Christmas. We'll have sort of a little bit of a lull. Not a lot of auctions take place in the month of December, and there aren't a lot of auctions coming along right now. There were a few, and we'll get into some of them. There's a few good things that have turned up in the last couple of days. But the big news, of course, has been the auction results over in London for the last couple of weeks. They've had some auction houses had great sales. Some of them was a little bit rough and bumpy. And I think a lot of that is going back to the concerns about expectations and high estimates and high reserves. And we saw cases where overly estimating things killed the auctions or hurt them, where they had large buy-in rates. We saw it in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, where there were some fairly abysmal sales, actually. I'll just say it for what it is, where 70% of the lots didn't sell. And that's just because reality hasn't set in on the heads of some of those sellers out there that they're not going to make probably a profit if they bought things in the 2010 to 2014 period, or if they've overcalculated the value of the things that they own, because people tend to do that. Things that they bought 20 years ago, they say, well, if I paid $1,000 for it then, it's worth $10,000 now. That's not the case. It's simply not the case. All right. The market tells you what your things are worth. You don't. That's how it works. And unfortunately, I think there's some disappointed people out there. The people that were smart, that put things up, the Priestley sale and so forth, they're dealers. They understand the market, and they put their things out, and everything sold pretty much. They had very successful results and very strong results, well over the estimates. And we saw that across the board in the UK last week, and the week before, and the week before that. Things that were smartly estimated, smartly reserved, which means low or none, they did really well. Things that had no reserves at all did fantastically well. And the reason is it's a welcoming environment for people that want to buy something and get them into that bitter state of mind where they see an object and they leave a bid on it, and suddenly that object is no longer an auction. They're thinking of an item that they're thinking about buying at auction. It's an item that they're going to buy. And now they're fighting to keep it rather than placing a bid to try to buy it. Once a bid is placed, the mind, the chemistry of the brain goes to work, and it becomes a situation where I'm not going to let you take that from me. And it becomes a mental competition, and that's what you want. That's what an auction is, mental competition. And the idea is to get everybody participating. And I know, because I was an auctioneer for years, and the big thing was to get bidders to get their hands up in the air. Started at a price where you have many, many hands going up all at once, and then all of a sudden the adrenaline kicks in and everybody's chasing. And that's the optimal environment for an auctioneer, I can tell you that. And anybody in the business will tell you. And sometimes the consigners are the problem. And I think in what we've seen the last few weeks have been perfectly good things that just didn't sell because of the consigners and what their expectations were. And I'm going to keep harping on that until we start seeing some changes, because people need to smarten up to that. All right, now, what happened last week? Well, there's been some pretty good results, and we'll get into them in a bit. But before we do, I want to talk about a few things that are coming up. And I'm going to start with this. Now, this is a rather nice bronze. And bronzes have been doing fairly well lately, as you know. There's a lot of interest in late Sung, what would they call later bronzes? Bronzes made in the Sung dynasty to the end of the Qing dynasty. There's books out. There's the exhibition taking place over in Hong Kong that we talked about last week. There's another one coming up that just finished at the Metropolitan Museum. What's it called? Recasting the Past. And that's an exhibition that's now heading into China. It was at the Met in New York. There's a catalog out on it. I highly recommend it. I'm going to talk about it more at some length in the next couple of weeks, I hope. I just got the book myself. It's quite good, and it's full of very good information. But at any rate, back to this. This is a very handsome bronze. It is a probably early 19th century example. Very well cast. It's got a nice surface on it, nice patina, nice relief work. And the big surprise on this, I was shocked at how big this thing is. It is, I want to get the number right here, 15 15 and a quarter inches tall. This is a big bronze. This is not a 5 or 6 inch bronze. This is a big one, like it goes in the middle of a table or on a sideboard in your house or on a hall table with a marble top, something like that. It would look absolutely great. It's got a nice surface on it, and it's an old one. This is not a reproduction, absolutely not. The casting on it is nice and crisp. It's very good quality casting for a 19th century bronze. It's extremely good. And if you flip it over and look at it, you see all kinds of wear on the bottom of that foot right there. You can see the center pin is flattened out. And this is just from the weight of it, from sitting on it for all these years, for a couple of hundred years nearly. But it's 175 years, something like that. But I think this is a good bronze. It's a nice example. And right now, it's not getting a lot of ascension. Now, the sale's on December 2nd, so it's got a ways to go. It's got 16 bidders on it. And this should bring $1,500 to $2,000 because of its size. It's very, very, very big. And this is going to be at Jackson's International in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Cedar Falls, Iowa on December 2nd at Jackson's. All right, and it'll be on the global pages by tomorrow morning. But I looked at it rather carefully, and I was thinking, it's a very nice looking example, and it's particularly good for a 19th century example, and I just happen to like it. All right, and then hopping along over to this sale here. This is Tremont's got a sale coming up. Right here in Massachusetts, out in Sudbury. They got an Asian sale up. They got some things. They have a few things that are pretty interesting. And one of them is this. And this they listed as a Mughal miniature portrait painting, India 19th century, a portrait of a turbaned, white-bearded elder. I believe this is a picture of Akbar II. If any of you are interested in Indian culture and so forth, this is Akbar II, because this is the robe that he often wore, the turban and all that, the white beard. I certainly think that's probably who it is. So it's not I think it is. They know who it is, and it's a rather nice miniature painting, I have to say. Very attractive. It's only 1 3/4 inches, rather well detailed, good color. Looks like it's a nice shape and it's nicely framed. The estimate is $200 to $300 with a $100 opening bid, which I think is quite reasonable. All right, and then hopping along over to this is also in this sale, I believe, right at the end. Yeah, there's some other things in there. This is something I noticed here. This is a very interesting book lot. If you're looking for good reference books, on the right is China for the West. David Hauer and John Ayres, their 2-volume set. I believe they wrote this for Sotheby's. Yeah, Sotheby's, when it was Sotheby's Park Benet. This was written a long time ago. And also this, A Collector's Vision, the RA collection, Chinese ceramics, Maria Antonia Pinto de Matos. And this is a very comprehensive set of books. It's 3 volumes full of some really nice ceramic examples. It's well written. It's been around for a few years. And this is a good lot. It's a very good book lot. And these are large folio books. These aren't little, 12-inch volumes. This book is probably, it's probably 15 inches tall. It's quite a large book. The estimate is $300 to $500. It's got 26 bidders watching it because the Ayres book, of course, is always popular, and that 3-volume set is quite elegant too. So there's going to be some competition for it. The estimate is $300 to $500, and I expect it to go over that. I expect it to bring probably $600 or $800 because of the combination of these 2 books. But they're well worth having. They're very, very good books. All right, and then hopping along, this is it coming up at Antique Arena in Brooklyn. And they occasionally get some pretty good things there. We don't cover them all that often because they usually have them in such huge sales and they scatter the stuff out and it's very hard to find. But anyway, this is a very nice pre-1850 rose mandarin bowl. Not rose medallion, rose mandarin. But notice the blue. It's got a wonderful, luxurious use of this aqua blue mixed with greens and so forth. It's very, very nicely done all the way around. I like the vine and floral framing of the center medallion here with the elder going across the bridge and a woman standing in her studio. This is a very nice export punch bowl. It's a beautiful example, and it's a nice big one. It's a 16-inch bowl. These do not turn up all the time, and it's on a some of it is on a celadon ground, it looks like, around the outside. It's awfully attractive, and the gilding, notice the gilt highlights all in good shape, no wear to them, no chipping. So this is a very good bowl. I happen to like it quite a bit. I think it's a good one. And the estimate is for nothing, $100 to $150 with a $50 opening bid. Now, this is on November 29th at Antiques Arena. This bowl should bring 1,000 to 1,500 minimum. Is a minimum. So the estimate is way off. They should have added a zero to both of the estimate numbers. They'd be much more accurate. Maybe they meant to, and it's an oversight on their part. I'm not sure. But at any rate, $100 to $150 would be the bargain of the year. But it's not going to happen. Right now, it's got 5 people watching it. So that means this auction just got listed fairly recently. But we're going to add this to the global pages. It's a very handsome bowl, no matter how you look at it. And then over to this. Now, this is interesting. They have this deck. This is also at Antiques Arena. They have it listed as Chinese hand-painted porcelain charger. This is a Rita-ware. This is Japanese. And just to make the point, there's the back of it. And those of you who collect Japanese will instantly recognize the Chenois mark and the way the underglazed blue is done, the single blue line out close to the foot rim, all the characteristics and spur marks. Chinese porcelain hardly ever had spur marks. It wasn't something they did. They needed to put supports under the bowls that they fired because they were big, and the clay their kaolin tended to sag more in the kilns and get stuck and have problems. So they would put little clay columns under the bottoms of the pieces to support them while they're firing until they cool off and harden. Anyway, this is a nice one. Appears to be either a late Edo or a Meiji period bowl, but it's a very interesting one, or charger. It's very interesting because it has calligraphy on it, and it's done very much in the Chinese style with all this grisaille decoration. And then they do this sort of ogival or crosshatch pattern in gold, outlined in, I guess it looks like it's outlined in black around the exterior. It's a very interesting piece of porcelain. It's quite unusual. And the lettering is in gold too, which is rather nice. And it measures, it's pretty good size as I recall. Yeah, it's 18 inches in diameter. This is a big piece of porcelain. And again, estimated at $100 to $150. Maybe they're estimating everything at $100 to $150. This is a $300 to $500 bowl. But if you like unusual Japanese amari, this is an unusual one. It's very, very unusual, very atypical. And atypical things are good to buy because they often don't get much attention because people don't know what to compare them to look up a price. And comparison buyers, comp buyers, I call them, they generally don't buy the best things. They just buy what's known. This is an unusual piece, and if you're an adventurous buyer and you like Japanese porcelain, I would recommend that. And then over to this. This is now at Antiques Arena. Also, I have to keep looking down because they're too far down the page. It's two very nice 18th century, probably they appear to be Kangxi period, cobalt rimmed with gold flower. These are beautiful. These are really nice bowls. These are bowls. These are like soup bowls, as I recall. They're fairly tall. There they are. Yeah, these are soup bowls. They're the backs of them. They certainly look like late Kangxi pieces to me. But notice the condition. Nowhere, this giant lotus flower in the middle is in gold with a weeping willow tree behind it on both. They're a wonderful pair. And they both appear to be in equally good condition. So, because sometimes you see them on these listings out there, the one that'll be really, really good, and the other one's got a bite out of it, and it's got a hairline in it. So you have to sort of base all of your bidding on the perfect example and consider the other one a freebie, so you don't get yourself into trouble on what you spend. Unless it's something you just have to have, then you just pay the money and get it. But these are absolutely lovely bowls. I think they're about 11 inches wide, as I recall, or something like that. No, these are huge. These are basins. I thought it was 11 inches. These are 17 inches wide. 17 inches wide. That changes the whole thing. These should bring $2,000 or $3,000 at least. These are massive. These are big pieces of porcelain. When I first read it, I thought it said 11 inches. I thought these were like dinner table bowls. These are center table bowls. Wonderful. That's even better. Check those out. Imagine those on your wall in your house. 17 inches wide each. Those are really, really lovely. My mistake. It's what happens when you read things too quickly. I just thought they were beautiful. And then over to this, the two Chinese export oil seascapes. Now this sale is tomorrow at Roland Auction Galleries in Glen Cove, New York. And these are big paintings. These are 19 inches tall because the China trade paintings, they did ovals. So you see them fairly often and they're fairly small, maybe 7 or 8 inches, 9 inches tall. These are 19 inches tall. These are quite large. And there's the tower, the famous tower in the Whampoa. And here's another one of a harbor scene. And these are oil on canvas. But very, very nice. These are not watercolors. These are Chinese oil paintings on canvas, done probably around 1840, 1860s, somewhere in there. But beautifully, these are quite beautiful. These are really, really quite beautiful and very big. You could make a wall out of these, and that's how you use them. But very, very nicely done. And then hopping along over to this is coming up at Eddie's down in New York on the 30th of November. This is a very unusual 18th century teapot, China trade teapot. The shape is unusual. The form and the style, all of it is unusual. It has this sort of rococo edging around it and these very nice figural scenes on boats in the middle and so forth. But it's quite elegant. It's very European looking and stylistically, I think, in a lot of ways. And I like the spout. The naturalized spout and this beautifully shaped handle. This is a good looking chocolate pot or punch. They call it a punch pot. I think it's a chocolate pot. Any rate, how tall is this? This is 9.5 inches tall. It's estimated at $400 to $600, which I think is more than reasonable. It'll easily get there. It's got 13 people watching it. The sale is on the 30th of the month, and that's at Eddie's. All right. Let me make sure that's bookmarked. And then over to this. This is also coming up at Eddie's, or I think it's Eddie's, isn't it? No, this is Allers and Ogletree. This is a reminder. Their sale is coming up in just about a week from today. And they have these cornerless pronk, Le Madame du Parasol. This was a famous pattern that Pronk invented. A lot of you will recognize it right away. And it came in a variety of color formats. They even did them in underglazed blue. Occasionally you see them with different colored borders. And some people just collect all the different types. And Cornelis Pronk worked during the end of the Yongzheng period. He was a Dutch porcelain designer. And I read somewhere once they said that one of his plates back in the day, I think it was just like one plate, cost almost as much as a house. They were very expensive. And they don't anymore, of course, but back then they were considered rare. And he didn't do them for long. He only designed porcelains for a couple of years, but he couldn't get enough work to make it worthwhile, so he moved on to other things, I guess. But anyway, these are quite nice. And the estimate, I think, is probably about right, $2,500 to $3,500. They're 9.25 inches wide. Starting price $1,200. There's probably not much of a reserve on this. Eddie's isn't big on reserves as far as I've seen in the past. So you may be able to pick them up for $700 or $800 a piece, which would be very reasonable. Typically, these sell for anywhere from $900 to $1,400 per plate. So the top estimate, $3,500, is a little on the strong side, I think. But the lower estimate seems sort of in the range for a pair, because people love to buy pairs. And then over to this. This is also at Allers and Ogletree. Nice 18th century, a Kangxi charger in the background. And then you have this probably Kangxi Amari dish in the foreground. It's one of those examples that has lots of white area open to it, and that giant blossoming lotus flower in the center, balustrade in the foreground. Quite attractive. The larger piece here, the big blue and white piece, is 15 inches in diameter. So I would say that the Amari example is probably around 12 inches or so, roughly. The estimate is modest, $150 to $300, $75 opening bid. It's only got 9 people watching it. The sale's on the 20th. These might be very viable. This might be a very good deal. And I've bought from Allers and Ogletree in the past. They're very nice people down there. And they're very cooperative, working with shippers and stuff. No problem at all. They're very good. And as I've said so many times, when you buy from an auction house, and do not pay unless it's inexpensive for some reason, the live auctioneer's shipping quote. Just pay the invoice and then call the auction house. And as I always say, just ask them and don't use a pack and ship store. Use a UPS store. They tend to be less expensive. I know people that run package ships, and they don't like to hear that, but they are more expensive, typically, by about 20%, 30% more. But register at Allers and Ogletree site, bid through Allers and Ogletree site, and when you're done, call them up and say, who is the UPS store in the area the store number that the dealers go back to over and over and over again, because they often have a list of 4 or 5 shipping operations that are on their thing, because they don't want to tell you what to use. But if you ask them who the dealers favor, 90% of the time, there's one in particular that they all go to over and over and over again, because they give the best service and they have the most reasonable prices, because dealers are in the business to make money and they do care about what things cost to get delivered, and only ship UPS ground in the United States. There's no reason in the world to do anything express mail or express overnight UPS or FedEx or any of that nonsense, unless you need it as a gift for somebody and it's a time matter. But if it's inventory or you're a collector, basically UPS ground will get anything from anywhere in the country to anywhere in the country in under 3 days. That's sort of my rule of thumb, and that's how it's always been. If they tell you it ships on a Monday, you'll probably have it Wednesday or Thursday at the latest. And to pay triple that to get it there the next day just isn't worth it. You're going to own it for a long time. Be a little patient and save a lot of money. All right, and then coming up, Marsan's got a sale coming up over in England. Marsan's a nice family. They're a good family over there, and they have regular sales. They sell things from fairly modest prices all the way up to very, very expensive. But I've communicated with them. I've never met them. I have communicated with them back and forth. It's a family business. They seem awfully nice, and the people over there that I've talked to that bought from them have said the same thing. They are a lovely, lovely group of people. They're very cooperative. They're very friendly. They're very helpful. And they've got a sale coming up. And this sale is on, I want to get the exact date, November 27th. So it's a couple of weeks away. You're in good shape. Marsan Auctions, MASAN Auctions. And just a little quick trick. If you're on Google and you want to get to a particular auctioneer on Live Auctioneers, and you don't want to go and use the go down to the bottom and look, you want to look up one specific auctioneer, and you don't want to bother going down and looking at the antique auction list and then going by alphabetically and finding them. If you just type the name of the auction house in Google and put a comma in, and then type in Live Auctioneers, or type in Live Auctioneers or Invaluable, it doesn't matter, comma, and the name of the auction house, they'll bring you to a link that takes you right to their account. It may be to a past auction or something like that, but it'll get you there instantly from Google, and you won't have to go digging around on the website trying to find a specific auctioneer. Just a little trick. I know a lot of you do that already, but just mentioning it. So anyway, Marsan's got this sale coming up. There's some very pretty things in here. There's some very nice blue and white and enamel and amari type dishes here. There's some good Qing examples. You've got this ruby ground, appears to be a Yongchen or early Qinlong dish. Quite nice. No complaints about that. And what else do they got in here? Oh, there's a whole bunch of things. They've got some miniature vases. They've got a nice piece of Blanc de Chine over here, a nice tripod jus. There's another nice export example over here, a couple of Republic vases, a very, very good grisaille decorated example in pristine condition. I looked at that earlier. I did a video earlier today for the Patreon subscribers, because I do one over there, an extra one over there every week, and just sort of talk about what I've got on my watch page. And I talked about that plate that's coming up in the Marsan sale. It's a hell of a good plate. And down here you have a whole bunch of other good-looking pieces here. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, and I think this was an oversight on their part. Wait a minute, let me get to it. They listed this as Qinlong period, and I looked at it pretty carefully. And the folks at Marsan, I don't think it is. I think this is a reproduction. It's a really good reproduction. But I'm pretty certain it's a reproduction, because some of the colors don't look right, and the bottom of it doesn't look right. The workmanship on it's amazing. And the reason I'm pointing this out is this is not a knock on them at all. This is an easy thing to miss, because I have not seen these before. The high-end armorial, the complicated armorial pieces and export pieces like this, but they're starting to turn up in the market. And they've been turning up in plates and armorial plates and dishes and bowls now for a couple of years. They've been coming in, because people thought for a long time nobody's going to copy armorial and export wares, because it was sort of out of fashion for about 20 years. Well, it's coming back into fashion. People are starting to buy it again, as we've seen at Brunk's and Stair Gallery and at Doyle's and at Freeman's. Really good armorial pieces now are starting to get some traction again. And if something is out of fashion, suddenly it gets traction, or if anything in the Chinese art world suddenly is popular, rest assured that the reproductions will hit the market within 2 months. All right, and we've seen it over and over. We saw it with the transitional wear pieces. We've seen it with the Sung pieces. We've seen it with Ming pieces. We've seen it with all of them. This is what they do. We've certainly seen it with things like brush pots and all that stuff. Once they start to get popular and they're worth a few $1,000s, the forgers in Jingdezhen are more than happy to start turning them out for you, and they turn out very good, very well made. It's quite impressive, actually, some of the pieces they can turn out and how quickly they can do it. But right now, as we all know, the market is absolutely flooded with transitional wear fakes, just flooded. It's unbelievable. It used to be you'd see one or two pieces of good transitional wear every few months or every year or two, even in New England, where there's an awful lot of stuff. We used to see it, and you'd buy them and sell them. People were interested in them at a price because they weren't as popular as they are now. But now there's one everywhere you look. Some auctions will have 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of transitional wares. And as you may recall, we've had a little bit of a kerfuffle with an auction house in Austria a few months ago about an example they had that we thought was very, very suspect. And it's not just there; they turn up all over the place now. And now we're seeing it with export wares, and this is I'm quite certain is an example of it. I'll send them a note later and maybe just say, hey, you might want to redate that. I don't think it was intentional on their part, because I suspect a lot of people are looking at it thinking it looks very good. It's got 11 people watching it. And the auction's only been up a short time. It isn't for a couple more weeks. So that gives you some idea how good they are. And that's that grisaille dish I was telling you about. And the reason this caught my eye was that it's absolutely in incredible condition. Because grisaille decoration, as many of you know, if you buy export wares, you've seen how the grisaille decoration, these black areas, they tend to wear. They're very sensitive to wear. And you don't see any wear on this any place. Often there's just at least one little spot where it's worn. I don't see any indication of wear here really at all. I'm not sure what that is right there. That might be a tiny bit of it. But notice the gilding and everything is in beautiful condition. This is a nice looking dish, very, very attractive. And the estimate is right. It's about 1,000 pounds, 800 to 1,000 pounds. That's about right for that. It could bring more. This got that kind of plate in that condition and quality could bring $1,800 to $2,500. But it's a very fine example. All right, and then hopping along over to this, we'll get into some results now. There's other things coming along, but there isn't much right now. But these we previewed them a few weeks ago. These are those Kosometsuke Tianchi wares for the Japanese market. In other words, they were made in China, but they were made for the Japanese market because the Japanese market had a long history of collecting Chinese blue and white. Some of the best blue and white collections in the world are in Japan rather. Absolutely amazing stuff. And of course, you have Mamayemo company, and you've got the old Yamanaka company that was in Japan, and they handled superb pieces of Chinese art. There's some great Chinese collections in Japan because of their appreciation for Chinese blue and white, and other porcelains, other objects too, of course. The Fujita Museum collection we all remember from a few years ago. They auctioned off a smidgen of the museum just to raise some money for some sort of capital improvement. I think the sale, Christie said, I think the sale pulled in $300 million or something. Just a few lots, just cleaning out a few cupboards. At any rate, this is a very lovely pair of Arita horse or Tianchi period, horses in naturalistic form. These are quite rare, and these were in beautiful condition. These were in exceptionally good condition, and they measure about, what are they, about 8 inches, 9 inches long or something? 7 inches long. There they are, 17.5 centimeters in length from the Setsu collection. And these sold for 5,000 pounds or $6,572 plus the premium, or around $9,000 for the pair. $9,000 for the pair. But those are extremely beautiful examples, very fine examples. And then there was this. This was over at Drew Eats, I believe, right? Yeah. And their sale. I think of all the sales over there, William Wallace had a good sale. Rosemary's had a pretty good sale. Their 100 Boys sale did fine. And William Wallace had some very good results. But Drew Eats had I think a particularly strong sale. And one of them was this. And you may recall a couple of weeks ago, I talked about this Cloisonne winged dragon jar because I just thought it was so beautiful. I thought the estimate was so reasonable. Well, it ended up being very reasonable. This had a $2,000 to $3,000 estimate, and it wasn't a terribly big jar. I didn't think it would bring quite this much. I have to say, I'll admit that. It's 12 centimeters tall, 12, which is about 5 inches roughly. A little over 5 inches tall. It was estimated at 2 to 3,000 pounds, and it ended up going for 130,000 or 99,000 pounds plus premium, or about 130,000 pounds in British currency, or in U.S. currency that would bring it up to about 170,000 U.S. dollars for this jar. But I just thought it was so darn pretty. Just an absolutely great example and in beautiful condition. And winged dragons don't appear that often on Cloisonne. And this was just a very fine example. If you had the chance to go and see it at the preview, you'll realize you probably picked it up, and it was probably quite heavy for its size, because they tended to be fairly thickly cast. But the colors on this looked really good. And Ming pottery, Ming Cloisonne rather, often you'll see lots of pinholes in the surface. And for a Ming example, this isn't bad. This is one that actually has a relatively little of it. Sometimes it's just covered with pinholes in the enamels, because they develop bubbles during the firing. And this one seemed to be in quite good shape, quite excellent. All right. And the sale did fine. We're going to get in. We'll do a complete review of that sale probably sometime next week or so. All right, and then over to this. This was at Adams's. They had a pretty good sale. They had a lot of sort of more modestly priced things, but they had this painting, and I previewed this a few weeks ago. It's an oil painting, mid-19th century oil painting, because I just thought the colors were so good. The shadows to the light, the dark, the women in the courtyard, this beautiful setting, this really a sort of idyllic setting. When I look at things like this, I always wonder, imagine having this as your yard. Wouldn't that be a wonderful place to live? Have your kids with the beautiful gardens and the big trees, and sitting out on this veranda at night up here, or in the gazebo. I guess that you'd call that a gazebo. It's like a gazebo here, at sunset, and just relaxing at the end of the day. I just thought it's such a wonderful scene. And the painting did fine. It ended up selling for $5,800 plus the premium, just sort of right over just sort of with the buyer's premium. It was over the high estimate, coming in at around what's that, about $7,000, $7,300. But a very nice example, beautiful painting. And then hopping along into this. Now, this was something I had talked about a couple of weeks ago, because I thought they didn't provide a picture of the bottom. You may recall I was talking about this, and I thought the decoration on the piece looked fairly good, but I found the handles, these mask handles, to be a bit of an issue in my mind. I couldn't quite figure it out, and they didn't provide a picture of the bottom, and I couldn't get a picture of the bottom, and nobody told me they got a picture of it, and this didn't sell. Now, this was supposed to be, very much in the style of like a really rare type of Kangxi brush pot, and it also it was the scene of the Seven Sages, but I'd never seen one with these weird little like rabbit heads or animal heads on the sides on a brush pot before. I thought it was very, very odd, and apparently so did a lot of people. It was estimated at 10 to 15,000, and it didn't sell at all. And the starting price was $5,000, and I think it was because I think that there's a reason why there wasn't a picture of the bottom of this. I'll just put it that way. And this was at Adams's, and I think they didn't put the bottom in because I think it would give it away that it probably wasn't authentic. But did they even date this thing? I don't think they did. No, they called it late Ming, early Qing, and I don't agree. If this was authentic, it would have flown out of there at about $80,000, because it would be unbelievably rare type. And obviously, enough people looked at it and said, nope, it's a repro. It's a copy, and they added heads to it. I think that's probably how it ended up. I may be wrong. Maybe somebody knows the story about it or something. Even it had a crack in the bottom. We remember a few months ago there was that, or a year ago or so, I guess it was at this point, there was a transitional or Kangxi brush pot that was at Leland Little, had a crack on the bottom. It still brought $20,000-$30,000 because these things have become so popular among collectors. And then moving along over to this was the Joseon period Korean vase with this floral decoration. This is a known type that they did do. There are examples very similar to it in the Korean National Museum. A very lightly decorated but beautifully potted and shaped. Quite a lovely jar. And I like this a lot. I had it. It's on the global pages. And the estimate I thought was very low, 3,000 to 5,000 euros. And it measured 30 centimeters, so it was a foot tall, just exactly a foot tall. Ended up selling for 18,000 plus premium, so around $25,000 for that. But very attractive, probably early 19th century, but a highly desirable model, as they say. And then over to this, we talked about this. This was the district auctions out in Seattle, right? Yeah, and they had a whole lot of they had some Chinese stuff in there, and to their credit, they didn't advertise them as antiques. They said just Chinese style, Ming style, that sort of thing. But this came from a different place, a different collection. I think this was a very. I caught my eye. I thought it was an awfully nice priest. Praying priest on his altar. It measured 14 by 13 inches and was 9 inches deep. So it would have been 14 inches tall. So it's a pretty good size one. This was a very, very nice piece. Edo period, probably 18th century, maybe a little before, and but wonderful. And then the base is later. The base is probably mid 19th century. But the upper section from here, this upper deck up, is old. And I thought it was quite nice. And in the end, it did fine. It did very well. The estimate was just $400 to $800. Ended up going for $2,250 plus premium, or around about $2,900 for it, which is a good price these days for Japanese wood carvings and lacquers. All right, and then over to this. This is the results from the Freeman sale for the DiCiccio, Joseph DiCiccio. He's a John Hancock Metropolitan Opera donor. He lives in Boston. He has a house in Nantucket. He's one of those guys, and he's got everything going on. He had a very good China trade collection of blue and white wares. Apparently, was his passion. And I don't know. I don't think he's dead. I think he's just maybe selling this stuff. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know whether he's passed away or not. If this was an estate or just cleaning out closets. But he bought a lot of stuff from the best dealers. He bought from show dealers. He bought from our friend Paulie Latham here in Boston. People like that. He bought at Sotheby's. And he had some awfully nice things. And one of them was this very rare pair. Now, these look like regular, sort of Fitzhugh, late 18th century teapots and so forth. They're not. These are English hunt scenes on them. All right, and this is not something you see often. You see the English hunt scenes on the 18th century enamel decorated bowls, the famous ones that they did for the British and so forth, with in colors, particularly on punch bowls. And here they are on a couple of pots. And there's one and there's one. These both date to the late 18th century. Very rare type. Always look closely at the details, because sometimes from a distance you can say, oh, it's just a couple of blue and white things. And then when you pull it in and see what the decoration actually is, you realize, wow, that's unusual. And that's why it brought the price. It ended up going for 19 plus premium, or about $2,600, $2,700. But that's not a crazy price for these at all. These are very, very unusual. For every one of the regular blue and one that you see like this in this form that have just a standard blue and white, Fitzhugh or Nanking decoration on them, that sell today for at auction. They typically bring anywhere from $250 to $350, $400, maybe. Out of 100 or 200, you get one of these. That's how rare they are. They're extremely unusual, and it brought a reserve price. And then there was the chestnut basket. You see these sometimes in Famille Rose and enamels and so forth, but not too often in just underglazed blue. And this was a meticulously done example, still had its under tray, and it's got this very nice finial on top. Beautiful example, and again, rare type. ended up went through its estimate, almost doubled. Actually, it doubled its high estimate by the end, because with the buyer's premium, it came in at about $3,900 and change. And this was where did this come from? This was bought. Okay, this was one of the pieces bought from Polly Latham. In Boston, she would buy a lot of stuff. She had good connections for decades over around the world in Europe, and she had all kinds of friends over there and people that she bought from. This was quite a nice example. And then there was the Monteith bowl, very unusual, nice gilt rim on it, measured about 10 inches in diameter, and this went for about $3,800 with the buyer's premium, but very unusual. A regular Monteith bowl without the gilding and so forth, without the molded base on it, just a simpler version, or the molded upper body for that matter. They go for about $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 these days, but this one is sort of a Rolls Royce version, and it did much better. And then this, of course, this was my favorite of all of them. Was the shape on it was so curvy and wonderful, and not terribly big, 7 inches wide, 6.5 inches tall. So it's fairly small, but a very rare type. And again, most of these are based on English silver forms that they would send over wood carvings emulating what they wanted for shape based on silver forms, and then they would have the Chinese potters replicate it. But this was a very fine Fitzhugh example, and really quite good. And this brought 16. I think this was sort of like a bargain, relatively speaking, $1,600 plus the premium. This actually sold for under its estimates, which was rather shocking, actually, because this was, of all of them, this was the rarest form in there, and I think one of the most interesting to look at. But again, atypical. Sometimes people don't notice it. And this came in, well, with the buyer's premium, it came in at about $2,200, $2,300. And then there was the set of 4 watercolors. I absolutely love these, and they were quite unusual because they were silk makers. This was silk production paintings, and these were large. These were fairly large. The frames were about the frames were about 27 inches wide each, so it's a whole wall. And you see the tea making paintings. I have the tea making paintings, and you have porcelain making and so forth. And then you had these big folio silk production, and either on European or English paper very often. You got to sort of examine them to see if they have the Watman stamp. There's another one, I think it's a Dutch paper company that sometimes turned up over there. But at any rate, $2,000 plus premium, about $2,600 for all 4. You basically bought the frames at that price. I think it was a very good buy, very judicious buy. All right, and then the last thing, this was at Freeman's also, was this very nice large dinner service. I almost left a bid on this, but I was wondering how the hell I'd get it up here. But there's like 3 teapots, several tureens, numerous vegetable dishes, tureen under trays, and so forth. It was a very nice set. Not an elaborate set, but a very nice set. Quite elegant. And lots of hollowware pieces, or serving pieces over here, chestnut baskets. You got a 2-handled sugar. You got oval platters, serving platters, square platters, dishes, little cups, open salts, tall salts over here, and then scallop rim platters, oval platter, round plate. There's a stack of plates in there, meat platter with the juice drain in the center, and then a big serving platter here. And it was just a good set, and ended up going with the premium for about $13,000, which I don't think was bad. It was an awfully nice looking set, all 18th century, very well made. And then the last thing of the Freeman sale was this. This did go way under the radar. And I think because people glanced at it and just assumed it's just another one of those, Canton blue and white late 19th century dishes, or late 18th century dishes. But look at the scene. It's a portrait of the city of Canton on this charger. This was a great thing. This was a really interesting thing. Very rare, very rare. And I'm hoping, maybe the Peabody Museum has one of these in their collection or something. But this is a really unusual platter, with the scene of Canton and the mountains in the background and so forth. And it sold for $650 plus the premium. Like I said, leave a bid. Always leave a bid. It measured 16 inches in width, so it's pretty good size. Where did he get this from? Did it say? Oh no, but Crosby. Oh, there it is at the bottom. Literature. Crosby Forbes. A rare view of Canton. Trade porcelain. Treasures from the East. Chinese export porcelain for the collector. 1984. He wrote about this very type of plate, and he was, of course, the gentleman who ended up being the real first big driving force behind the China trade collection at the Peabody Essex Museum. And he had the Captain Robert Bennett Forbes Museum. You may remember we've talked about them many times before. The Forbeses lived in Milton, Massachusetts, and the Forbes brothers were instrumental in the China trade out of Boston with the Perkins Company, and they were very, very influential. They were the ones that got Sunqua, one of the big port merchants, to front him $200,000 back in the day to invest in American railroads on behalf of a Chinese merchant. There's all kinds of great stories. It's all in the Peabody Museum, and he merged the Forbes House Museum with the Peabody Essex Museum. And Crosby wrote the very famous book, the first real book on China trade silver. That's sort of the Bible of that category. But he was also a fantastic man. I knew him fairly well, and I've said before I bought, when he passed away, I was very pleased to buy a couple of very fine watercolor paintings, Chinese export watercolor paintings that were in his collection when they held his auction, and a few other things I bought from it. But he was a great guy, and he was very generous with his knowledge. For many years, and then he came along, and after him was William Sargent, who, of course, wrote the books on the Copeland collection, and he's now a consultant with Bonhams and doing very, very well. And now the department is run by a wonderful lady named Karina Corrigan, who's been there now. She's been there, I guess, now 20 years. It's hard to believe. Jesus. Anyway, it's a long history, but this was back to this platter. Sorry, I didn't mean to rail on. This is a really wonderful plate, and I think somebody got an astonishingly good buy on this because it's such an unusual scene. And then lastly, what was this? Oh, this was the end of Freeman's sale. This was just sort of the stuff that all the stuff was in sort of a general sale of Americana, American decorative art, American folk art, and so forth. And you'll notice that some of the folk art, this is why I left it here. I want to show some of the American folk art stuff is starting to get a little bit of traction. Freeman's tracks American prices pretty carefully for these kinds of sales, and you'll notice like this one here was estimated $2,500 to $3,500, attributed to William Fink, the German painter, and it ended up going for over the high estimate by about almost 50%, 3750 plus premium. And then you have this American School 19th century portrait of a young man as a young scholar, estimated at $8,000 to $1,200, went for $2,750 plus the premium, so $3,500. And you're starting to see, we're still seeing sort of a little bit of a groundswell of interest in American decorative art again. And I also there was a very nice pier table that sold recently. It was a fairly standard New York pier table, and it ended up going for about $4,000 or $5,000, which is a lot more than they were bringing 10 years ago. They were selling for about $500. So it seems to me there's some people stepping back in and maybe deciding they want to decorate their houses with some nice antiques that reflect the history of this great country and all this other stuff. So I'm very, very pleased to see that. Because it does give you owning these kinds of things, especially if you're an American furniture collector and you're collecting China trade and all that, you're really pulling together the history of multiple things, the history of the country and its formative years. You're pulling in the first the trade that America got into during its formative years and into the 1800s and all that. This thing, because it hasn't really been a country for that long when you think about it in relative terms to other countries. It's only been a couple of hundred years. And it's a fascinating opportunity right now for people to have artifacts and interesting objects of culture and taste from those periods. It's something to be very happy to own, I think. And it's great for your life. It enriches your life and so forth. And now that the pink-haired lunatics have all gone away in Washington and the government's reopened and hopefully people will stop screaming and acting like fools, that we can get back to doing what the country needs to do. But that's a whole other thing, of course. At any rate, this is a very interesting result, and I hope to see more of it in the future. There was actually a red washed blanket chest that sold at Bronx that brought was estimated a few $1,000s. Ended up going for about 15,000 or 14,000 with the premium. We noticed that also. So there seems to be some shifts coming in this market. So don't be afraid to buy a good piece of American furniture, American classical furniture, something good to place in your house to put your Chinese porcelain on. And it doesn't have to be export porcelain. You could put a big Wan Li charger on it if you want. All right, or a big piece of Arita-ware, whatever. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Subscribe here if you haven't so far. Join us over on Patreon. I noticed a number of you have joined on Patreon lately. I put stuff on there almost every day, as you know, if you're a subscriber there. And I noticed we had a number of new subscribers this week. So if you're one of them, thank you and welcome. And don't forget to make suggestions of things you'd like to see. We try to add something on there almost every day. We pretty much do, or we add something 6, 7. Sometimes we add 2 or 3 things in one day if I come across things that I want to get up there right up. And all the videos, of course, that we do here are there. And if you do subscribe over there, just so you know, you get the global pages, you get the free weekly copy of the Antiques Gazette, you get the direct links to all the good auction houses. There's a page in there for that that handle Asian sales, and you watch all these videos without ads. So if you don't like the YouTube ads, you can go over there, and for $5 a month, you can get that and not have to get interrupted with silly gold ads or whatever else they put on there. I try not to have them on the channel, just so you all know. We get emailed every week by companies that want us to advertise gold, health supplements, and they all tell me it's a great fit for what I do on my channel. It's hilarious. And I wouldn't recommend buying gold to anybody for any reason right now. It's way overpriced. But we keep getting these solicitations, and I keep telling them we don't take ads. We don't take ads. Thank you. We do not take ads. And I guess there must be 100 companies out there that are doing ad brokerage deals with YouTubers. It's not something I know too much about, and nor am I interested. But at any rate, that's just a finishing up here. All right, thanks again. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. We're going to get some news results for Woolley and Wallace. We're going to do the Druid thing, see how they did. There was an interesting auction. There's a number of them we're going to try to do next week. I'm going to be out of town for a day or two at the beginning of the week, but we'll be back in the middle of the week. All right. And I'll bring the laptop. We'll do some stuff while I'm traveling for a couple days, so forth. All right. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.